You're listening to the Seahawks Insiders.
At the goal line, at the one, the handoff to Walker. He goes left side, and he's going to get in. Touchdown, Seahawks!
Getting you ready for Seahawks football every Sunday.
Blitz is coming, throw inside. It's picked off. Leo Williams coming near side. He's running like a racehorse. He's at midfield, turns upfield, has blockers. Holy smokes, are you kidding? Leo Williams is going to take it in for a touchdown, Seahawks!
Presented by Delta, the official airline of the Seahawks. Now, here's your host, Jen Mueller.
Jen Mueller is actually not your host today. You're stuck with me, John Boyle, but the payoff is you get the one and only Rob Rang, the best draft analyst in the business for my money. And we are here today broadcasting from the Seahawks podcast studio presented by Sony, an official partner of the Seattle Seahawks. Rob, welcome.
Thank you so much, John. Very kind words. I appreciate it.
Well, obviously the NFL draft, big deal for every NFL team, and I know the Seahawks came out of this one feeling really good about it. We ran into one of the scouts in the hallway, Ryan Florence, who was, you could just sense the energy coming off of him as we walked down here to the podcast studio. Just big picture-wise, what do you take away from what the Seahawks got done the last 3 days?
I'm really excited about what they were able to accomplish here. I thought that this was a draft that set up well for them, that they needed to kind of address the line of scrimmage, and I thought that they did so in spectacular fashion, got themselves a young, dynamic quarterback. I think this is my job is to try to be as fair as possible, as impartial as possible with all 32 NFL teams. But I can tell you this, I don't think that any of the NFL teams out there did better than the Seahawks in the 2025 draft.
Grey Zabel, obviously their first pick, addressed an obvious need for this team. They go out, they get, arguably the best interior guy in this draft. And as we heard from John Schneider, he is who they saw as their top interior guy.
We were able to land our number one interior offensive lineman, Grey Zabel. I believe it's the highest player we've picked since interior player we've picked since Hutch, which was cool. I was able to be part of that with Coach Holmgren and Ted and Scott McLuhan and that crew. So it's pretty fun. And Hutch loves him. Everybody loves this guy. He's just buttoned up, tough, smart, reliable, our kind of guy. And really, our first exposure was at the Senior Bowl when he had a great week down there, and it was like, and we felt like 18 to where we were, it was like a sweet spot for the interior offensive lineman. Now Booker went 12. But yeah, so just really excited.
Rob, just what's your big takeaway on Zable? I know he was a guy that by the time the draft rolled around, a whole lot of people thought might be coming to Seattle.
Yeah, I did think that there was a chance that he would fit in well with the Seahawks, that he would be available to the Seahawks and certainly fit well with what they're looking to do. Of course, then this wide zone offense where there's a priority on athletic ability, that's the thing. Is Grey Zabel was spectacular in workouts at the combine, and then John Schneider mentioned it at the Senior Bowl. Grey Zabel basically was kind of stealing repetitions. I mean, he was blocking as a guard, he was blocking as a center. And then previously at North Dakota State, of course, he had played an awful lot of tackle. And it didn't matter who was up playing opposite him, what position that Grey Zabel was lining up at, he was just stonewalling people. And so I think that he proved himself to be well worthy of a top 20 selection at the Senior Bowl, and then followed that up with a combine. And I thought that once that the Seattle was on the clock at number 18 overall and Zabel was available, then it was basically a slam dunk selection.
For these guys coming from the smaller schools, from FCS schools, how big is that opportunity at the Senior Bowl when they get to line up against Power 5 guys and put pads on and show what they can do? It's
absolutely massive. That's the thing, is that one of the arguments that we had as far as why the Seahawks would not take Grey Zabel is that in the past 15 years, John Schneider and the Seahawks had never invested a top 100 selection in an FCS prospect. And so, that's who Grey Zabel was competing against. The only time that they had gone up against Division I team was against Colorado. So he only had one game in the last 4 years, in which he had played against that type of competition. So you were a little worried about that. And then you go to the Senior Bowl and you're hoping that he is going to play reasonably well. Just prove that you can compete at this level. Instead, Grey Zabel went there and dominated. He was the best blocker, in my opinion, of anybody there at the Senior Bowl. And it wasn't just my opinion. He was voted as the best offensive lineman throughout the week of practice. So, again, I think that he just kind of slammed home the idea that he was going to be a first-round selection, and that's why I think that the Seahawks scouts and coaching staff sound like they're very, very excited about Zable.
Day 2 of the draft started off early for the Seahawks. In the action early, move up, pick number 35, which is the earliest John Schneider's ever traded up in a draft. He's made some day 2 picks up, but never gone up as high as 35. They did that to get safety Nick Emenwari from South Carolina, one of the best athletes in this whole draft, and a guy that they like so much, as John Schneider told us, they thought about moving up even late in round 1 to get him.
Last night we were really, we had a lot of conversations about, how do we do this? I mean, we almost traded back up in to get Nick. Everybody was extremely passionate about it. If we would have come out of the draft without him, we would have been disappointed. Now, same thing. I mean, same thing with Elijah. I mean, everybody was talking, throughout the process, throughout all of our meetings. There's no way. Like, how do we? Like, are we gonna be okay with this guy? Like, are we gonna be able to use him? This guy's like, how do you add that guy? And it's all for like the people, the competitors, the athletes. They just feel like they all just feel special. I can't describe it any different than to say they feel special. Like they feel different, and it's a great thing. Like I said last night, respecting the group of players that's here right now to add these guys in, it's gonna be outstanding.
That's to me is one of the most exciting aspects of this draft. Is I felt like the Seahawks basically checked the major box that they had to by getting the offensive lineman in the first round, and then they were able to kind of just have some fun. Let the draft kind of take the best talent, the elite athletes that were available, and if you weren't sure that a player like a Nick Emenwari was going to fall all the way down to number 50, then be aggressive. You had built up enough draft picks that you could actually use some of that draft ammunition to move up, and that's exactly what they did in selecting Nick Emenwari. Look, this was a first-round selection all day long, and the fact that he fell out of the first round, I think, is just more of a reflection of the fact that there were so many linemen, offensive and defensive linemen, that went in the first round. I counted it up. There was 8 offensive linemen that went in the first round. I mean, of course, there's only 32 first-round selections. So for a full quarter of those selections to be offensive linemen, that's going to push some really good football players down the board. Nick Emenwari, I just love the versatility that he offers, the size, 6'3", 220 pounds, just the elite athlete that he is. To me, he is that movable chess piece that Mike McDonald is going to absolutely just love being able to utilize. And then jumping to the tight end, John Schneider mentioned Elijah Arroyo from Miami. And I guess I should even almost put in air quotes the idea of tight end with Elijah Arroyo, because he just moves like a smaller man. He's 6'5", 255 pounds, and yet he looks like he could play the wide receiver position. He actually lined up against cornerbacks at times at the University of Miami, as well as at the Senior Bowl, and just demonstrated his ability to not only get open, but to make contested catches and then run away from smaller, typically quicker defensive backs. I think that, again, this is another player here that is going to just diversify Seattle's offense and create that much more of a big play threat down the stretch.
It's worth talking about, too, here. That kind of the ability to do this shows the exciting part of a draft when you get those extra picks in day 2. Like they were able to do this because of the trades they made, getting that 3rd-round pick for Geno Smith, getting that 2nd-round pick for DK Metcalf, where you can make a big move up and you're still sitting there with 2 second-round picks and a third when you come out of the day to add some players they really like. Rob, now we go to one of the more, interesting and exciting picks potentially in this draft for the Seahawks, a guy that, quarterback's not necessarily a need for this team, but by the time you got to the 3rd round, Jalen Milroe sitting there right at the top of their board, and they get a really explosive player. I know obviously there's, maybe some concerns or limitations on him as a passer right now, but with the arm talent that he has and obviously the athleticism, just what kind of player do you see in him?
To me, he is the ultimate lottery ticket in this entire draft class. I just see a guy that is a developing passer. There's no question about that. But you of course, have a quarterback that was a Pro Bowler in Sam Darnold that you brought in. And so, you feel already good as a starter that you have the quarterback in place right now. Yeah. But if you are looking to develop a player, then why not have a guy that could be special? Mm-hmm. And Jaylen Monroe has that. This is a guy that his straight line speed, his agility to make people miss, and then just the power. I mean, this is a guy who is just a rocked up 6'2", 220 pounds, and is just as physically put together as you're ever going to see at the quarterback position. He's there. There's some elements of his play that are reminiscent of a former Alabama quarterback, Jalen Hurts, who of course was the MVP of this last Super Bowl, and so that's exciting. But he also has the breakaway speed of a guy like a Lamar Jackson, and so again, just so exciting about the potential that he offers. I would not be surprised at all to see the Seahawks run some different systems to try to get Jaylen Monroe onto the field early, even as a rookie. But I think that the exciting thing about Milroe is just what he could be a couple of years down the line.
Yeah, and one thing with Milroe that I think is worth mentioning is even if he's not the most polished passer right now, this isn't a guy who he doesn't have the arm talent to make this. Or he's got the arm strength. He's shown maybe not consistently all the time, but he can make all the throws. And as he told us on a conference call, he's a confident dude that he knows he can make all the plays.
There's nothing I can't do in the football field. The things I can improve on, absolutely. But it's nothing I can't do on the football field. I've thrown every type of touchdown, stepping up in the pocket, throwing on the run. I'm going through my progressions. I've thrown a check down and they've scored. I've used my legs. So, when looking at it, pick and choose what you want on the field. I can do it. So I say that humbly, not over arrogant. It's just more just knowing what I bring to the table and knowing that I just a different dynamic when it comes to being on the football field that I know I'm going to utilize in the NFL.
And just a really exciting player, as you mentioned, and that takes us into day 3 now, and a wild start to day 3. I'll write about this later on Seahawks.com, but I'm lucky enough to be in the draft room for parts of the draft and watch that all unfold. For you guys, watching that, just seeing it all go on TV, just what's kind of the reaction? Seahawks they're moving back, they're trading a player, they're trading out of another pick, and just doing a lot of juggling all at once there to start round 5.
Yeah, it was fascinating because there was quite the long wait before the Seahawks were on the clock, and then there was a trade down, and then as you mentioned, the Seahawks wound up trading Sam Howell at the quarterback position, and then they're taking Riley Mills, a defensive tackle from Notre Dame that again I think just fits in so well to the Seattle culture, to what Mike Macdonald's looking to have on the defensive line, where you have guys that not only can get to the quarterback, but also have just the physicality, the toughness to be able to play the run as well. This is a guy that reminds me a little bit of the player that Seattle traded for a year ago, a veteran in Roy Robertson Harris. His ability at 6'5", 290 pounds roughly, to play inside as a traditional defensive tackle, also slide all the way outside. Again, I just think that when I imagine Mike Macdonald's defense, not only this past season with the Seahawks, but previously with the Baltimore Ravens, that pressure came in waves. And that's one of the things that I feel that Riley Mills is going to be able to help the Seahawks provide. And it is important to note that he is coming off of a knee injury, but that's one of the reasons why he was available at pick number 142 overall. When healthy, and the Seahawks expect him to be healthy at some point this upcoming season, when healthy, this is a guy who absolutely deserves a top 100 selection. The Seahawks got him at 142 overall. They basically got a bargain basement price for a player that I think is going to wind up being an NFL starter.
That's something Schneider pointed out with Arroyo as well. He's saying, this may be a top 15 talent if he's healthy throughout his career, but he missed so much time. Where is somebody who's been around scouting a lot, where is that sort of give and take? How do you find the balance of, man, this guy's really talented, but we got, injury history or, coming off a fresh injury, things like that. Just how do teams sort of decide how to make those decisions?
Well, that's one of the interesting things is that it used to be that the 5th round was kind of used as the round where, okay, you can get a little bit cute. You can a player who's coming off of an injury, or a player that had some type of character red flags or something of that nature. That wasn't the case at all as far as character red flags with any of the players that the Seahawks drafted here. But they did have some players, as we just mentioned, with Elijah Arroyo and Riley Mills that are coming off of injuries. I think that just in today's era, I mean, I've been doing this now for 25 years. In today's era, to be coming off of a surgically repaired knee or something of that nature, that it's just there is a belief that the player is going to come back as good or bigger or stronger than ever. And so I think that you have to, certainly recognize that every player and their recovery is unique. But at the same time, that if you had a grade on a player that was, say a 3rd round pick, then at most you should probably only be dropping them around anymore. Otherwise, you're in danger of losing them. Yeah, exactly. And when you have talents as dynamic as Elijah Arroyo, as steady as Riley Mills, then I think that again the Seahawks played this beautifully, because if you would have waited too much longer, then you're going to be finding a much less talented player available to you.
And then they had to wait a little bit there in round 5 because they did trade back with that 144. That was a move back they made. And then with 166, they go Tory Horton, a receiver from Colorado. A guy that was very productive for a couple of years. As you mentioned, there was the injury last year, but a guy put up some big numbers when healthy. What do you like about his game?
Oh, there's a lot to like about Tory Horton's game. He was one of my favorite selections of this entire draft for the Seahawks. I remember back to watching Tory Horton at Nevada, and then watching him make he wound up transferring to Colorado State and was just as productive at Colorado State as he was in the flashes early in his career at Nevada. He's 6'3". He's 196 pounds. He runs in the 4.4s just a couple of weeks after a small procedure on his knee as well. So again, when you are a player that hasn't had an opportunity to fully recover, to fully get into sprinting shape, and yet you still just basically wake up and run a 4.4. I mean, it's like Willie Mays Hayes out of the movie Major League. And I realize
that's a great reference.
Using a baseball reference here.
Our producer Ashley will not understand a Major League reference because it was before her time. But I got you. That
might be true, but still, it speaks to how explosive an athlete that Tory Horton is. He was a 2-time All-Mountain West player as far as being as a pass catcher at the wide receiver position. Over 1,000 receiving yards each of the past couple of seasons. And then what I like most about him, and I think that the Seahawks also are very much going to appreciate that, is that he brings legitimate punt return skills. He had a punt return for a touchdown each of the last 3 seasons. So it's not just one splashy play. This is consistent production. Again, he has the size that you're looking for on the outside. He also has elite speed. So very excited about what Tory Horton might be able to provide a Seahawks team that, as you mentioned, John, that they have to replace DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett. I feel confident that they have the pass catchers to be able to do so.
I didn't mention that, but thanks for bringing that up because, so you're right. This is, they go out and sign Cooper Kupp, but they still, have some, and Marquise Valdes-Scantling, but they still, wanted to get deeper at receiver and add some talent. And you brought up the return thing. I mean, that's a very unset position for them right now. They don't have a clear-cut returner. So to kind of check all those boxes, and then we'll get to it later, but add another receiver later on, I think that's really going to help them feel deep at that position. Before we move on, we want to remind fans that this season you can feel every play, every hit, and every moment with the Sony 1000 XM5 noise-canceling headphones, the official headphones of the Seattle Seahawks. With premium noise cancellation, you're in the zone. No distractions, just pure football. Whether you're in your living room or on the go, you'll never miss a beat with Sony headphones. And continuing in the 5th round, a fullback. Not a pick you always see in the draft in this day and age, but from what we've heard from Clint Kubiak, from Mike McDonald, we knew a fullback's going to be part of this offense. So what can you tell us about Robbie Ouzts?
Really exciting player. I mean, it's not often that I say something like that about a fullback, but you're talking about a guy who's 6'3", 274 pounds, and yet still was clocked in, I believe that John Schneider said 19
miles an hour on the GPS.
I mean, just think about that. I mean, if you're driving your car, down the road and you see somebody pass by you at 20 miles an hour, you're not expecting to be 274 pounds. And so the amount of speed and power in which that is creating, that combination, just imagine that at the fullback position. I mean, he is going to be able to move people at the line of scrimmage. He's going to be able to knock linebackers. I mean, linebackers are usually some of the biggest, toughest, nastiest guys on the field. And
he's going to outweigh him by 20 pounds.
Exactly. And so that, to me, is one of the most exciting things about this. It's the fact that we talked about the former Alabama quarterback, Jalen Milroe, and his ability as a runner. Now you have an Ouzts, a player that knows him well and is going to be able to, the combination of the two could create some really dynamic packages there, close to the red zone, an area in which the Seahawks have struggled. And so I think that whether it be as a lead blocker for Seattle's talented stable of running backs or in a possible wildcat quarterback situation, even a tush-push situation, Ouzts is going to be able to provide the oomph for the Seahawks as well.
Ouzts with the oomph. Let's get that on a T-shirt, Rob.
I'm going to try.
Speaking of moving people, the Seahawks went back to the offensive line in round 6, pick 192. Bryce Cabeldue out of Kansas, a guy, kind of a theme of this draft. They got a lot of athletic dudes who test really well across the boards athletically. What can you tell us about Bryce's game?
Well, very athletic. He was one of the players that I think was very much moving up in the draft realm as we were getting a little bit closer. He had some buzz about him. And typically when you have a player that has some buzz, then every NFL team is kind of talking about him. I had some scouts that I was kind of checking in with him about him, and just because North Dakota State is as crazy as it might sound, and North Dakota State, of course, is where the first round selection, Grey Zabel, went to college. North Dakota State is well known among NFL scouts for being kind of a hotbed for offensive line talent. The Kansas Jayhawks, as crazy as it might sound, have become a bit of a hotbed for offensive linemen as well. We've seen a number of players here in recent years that come from Kansas and be very successful. That's the thing about Cabeldue, is that he has great agility for a player that was playing at the left tackle position at Kansas. I think he's going to most likely slide inside to guard for the Seahawks. And again, his lateral agility, his straight line speed is just very intriguing for the type of offense in which the Seahawks are going to be implementing.
And then next up, the Seahawks went back to Miami and back to running back, getting Damien Martinez. Now, I'm not going to pretend that I watch a lot of ACC football, so at first I didn't really know a lot about Martinez, and then I thought, that name rings a bell. And that's because what he was doing at Oregon State in particular. He had a couple huge games against the Huskies. So he came on his conference call with us, and he called himself Beast Mode 2.0. That's a big statement for a guy coming to the NFL, especially to this franchise. But man, the dude does run with some power. What have you seen watching Martinez? Yeah,
as you said, power. It's not only the power. He plays for a guy who is 6 foot, 217 pounds, John. And it's a lot of times you see backs of that height that play too upright. He will lower his shoulder into defensive players the way that Marshawn Lynch, of course, used to. He would initiate the contact, almost like, he would get into that beast mode kind of mentality, throw a couple of Skittles in and just like transformed himself into a whole different type of a person. That's the way that Damien Martinez runs. He runs angry, runs physically and violent. And then I think that he also is a really nice fit in this wide zone system. And, the wide zone system, I keep mentioning this, but it's a system that basically that allows the running back a little bit more space to make his own decisions. He's often is running kind of laterally and then is looking back to see if there are cutback lanes that he can exploit. Think back to the old Denver Broncos with Terrell Davis and Mike Anderson and guys like that. Guys that didn't necessarily have that elite 4.4 speed. They still played fast because they had such great vision, such great balance through contact. That is Damien Martinez. And I love the fact that you mentioned the Oregon State production because, again, this is a player that played 3 years of college football. 2 at Oregon State, 1 at Miami, and everywhere he went, he was the bell cow.
Yeah,
he
1,000-yard rusher, just powering through dudes.
Exactly.
Fun to watch. I mean, that UW game jumps out at me from 2 years ago. I was like, because I didn't know a lot about him. Then I was like, whoa, who is this guy? And so to see it kind of come full circle and he's back in the Northwest with Seahawks is very exciting.
It's funny, too, because when I think of Oregon State football, I think back, and again, this may not be a reference that Seahawks fans are going to appreciate because Steven Jackson was so good for the Rams.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, that's who I think of as far as great Oregon State backs. Damien Martinez reminds me a little bit of the way Steven Jackson ran. So again, we're talking about some of the best backs in recent 20 years of NFL history. I thought that because this running back class was deep, arguably the deepest positional group, and we know that the Seahawks have typically drafted at least one running back just because of the attrition of the position, that they might take one. But I thought, okay, this is going to be a guy that might be able to be a complementary type of a player. Damien Martinez can be that. But if there were the unthinkable, and you had multiple injuries at that position, Damien Martinez can be that bell cow back if you needed him to be so.
And then back to the offensive line again, Mason Richman, who, as he told us, got a surprise phone call. It was actually Grey Zabel that made the draft call from the draft room because Zable happened to get in on Saturday afternoon to meet coaches and kind of get toured around the building. So fun phone call for another Iowa lineman. We've seen a lot of Iowa linemen come through the NFL. He's a guy, Seahawks sounds like they're going to start him at tackle, but could maybe move inside as well. Just what kind of player are they getting in Mason Richman?
To me, he is one of the safest players of this draft class for the Seahawks because he is just a proven commodity. As you said, there have been an awful lot of really good Iowa offensive linemen. They have a head coach there, Kirk Ferentz, who is a former NFL offensive line coach. He's the longest tenured coach in all of college football. I mean, he is just the epitome of consistency. And of all those players that he has coached over all these years, Mason Richman is one of the very few that started 5 years, 52 career starts, and all of them at the left tackle position for the Iowa Hawkeyes. So again, this is a program that is known for producing quality offensive linemen, and at the left tackle position, of course, is as celebrated as any position up front. I love the fact that Seattle is going to allow him to prove that he can't play at the tackle position. Give him the opportunity to do that first. There have been some concerns about whether or not that he was athletic enough or has the arm length to remain outside at tackle. I think that when you have been as productive as you've been at the college level for a program like Iowa, then allow him that opportunity first. And then if it doesn't work out, he's so smart, he's so physical, he's so tough, is one of the things that John Schneider kind of acknowledged in the post-draft press conference, is, again, this toughness that he was willing to play through pain. Those are the type of attributes I think that suggest that Mason Richman is going to way outplay his selection in the 7th round.
And then after getting Tory Horton, the Seahawks go back to receiver to close out the draft. When you talked about Horton, you mentioned special teams. I don't think I've ever seen somebody get 4 blocked punts in one season like Ricky White did on his way to special teams player of the year honors in his conference. I mean, that right there jumps out at me, but obviously he also did a lot as a receiver. Just tell us a little bit about Ricky White III.
Again, another one of my absolute favorite players in this draft class, just because of the fact that, as you mentioned, with the special teams acumen, the 4 blocked punts, those all came just this past season.
Yeah.
So it's not like this
1
is
year.
over
That's
his career.
Wild.
I mean, he led the country. Nobody else had more than 2.
Yeah.
So, I mean, he's literally doubling up. For a UNLV team, again, kind of like we talked about with Kansas, I mean, these are not those traditional blue blood kind of college football powerhouse programs. The Seahawks got themselves some players that helped put their teams on the college football landscape. And so, again, with Ricky White III, you're talking about a guy that has special teams ability, who is a physical blocker downfield. And then, oh, by the way, he's also a very effective deep ball passer as well. He got 11 touchdowns this past season. So, again, this is a big play threat, a guy that has some dynamic athletic ability, and he's highly competitive. I thought that wide receiver was a position of concern for the Seahawks. Certainly on special teams, you want to have bodies, guys that are fast, are athletic, are tough, and competitive. Ricky White checks all those boxes.
All right, we did it. We got through all 11 draft picks. Just, again, really exciting class. Any other big takeaways you get out of this as you've gone over all 11 of these guys that you just kind of stands out?
Yeah, to me, one of the things that's exciting about this is that there are a number of other NFL teams here that got themselves into double-digit draft selections. I don't know that there's any team that had both quantity and quality to the level that the Seahawks just had. I've been covering the NFL draft, as I mentioned before, for an awful long time. I've watched all of John Schneider's selections over the years, and I know this sounds crazy to say it, considering some of the historic draft classes that he has helped bring to Seattle. But in my opinion, this might just be the very best.
Oh, we're holding you to this, Rob.
Well, I'm just so excited about the dynamic talent they got, especially in the top end. I think you can make an argument, and because you see flashes with the young quarterback Jaylen Monroe that are first round caliber.
Mm-hmm.
As we talked about, had the Miami tight end / wide receiver Elijah Arroyo not been coming off the injury, he may have been a first round pick. Certainly Nick Emenwari and Grey Zabel were first round caliber. I mean, you're talking about 4 players that are legitimate first round caliber flashes on tape, and just considering the experience of the offensive coaching staff being brought to Seattle, I just think that this is a group that has so much potential, and now you have the coaching staff as well to really turn that potential into production.
Well, Rob, I thank you for joining us. It sounds to me like you're telling us we need to celebrate. People can celebrate how they like, do so safely, but if you need any help with ideas, we can toss it to first-round pick Grey Zabel with his celebration tactics.
Man, I'm probably going to start diving into these bush lights and celebrate. have the 12-hour rule. We get to celebrate it for 12 hours when we get back to work. So I got an unbelievable crew here. My head coach, my offensive line coach, they're all down here, and a lot of friends and family. So high alert for Pierre, South Dakota. We're gonna have some fun, and we're gonna enjoy this tonight.
We are not in Pierre, South Dakota, but hopefully people can have a little fun and enjoy this draft. Rob, thank you again. Tell people where they can find your excellent work.
Well, definitely at foxsports.com. I'll be putting out some draft grades here in the next couple of hours. And then if you also are interested in some, besides the Seahawks podcast that you're listening to here, then I do some work with Locked On Seahawks podcast as well.
All right. Thanks again, Rob. Appreciate it.
Thank you so much.